Howdy once again, it's tubalcain, your YouTube shop teacher. And in this video, I'm going to grind some dead centers on the Atlas Craftsman 12-inch lathe. Now, in the previous video, I did a very similar thing, only with the South Bend lathe, but there's probably more Atlas Craftsman lathes out there than any other brand in people's garages and basements, so that will be the subject of this video, grinding some dead centers. Now, in the following video, I plan on grinding a ball bearing live center, so we'll see how that works out. Now, this is a Dumore grinder. I used it in the last video. I'm going to go down to the basement shop now and show you 3 other Dumore grinders that I have, because there's a wide variety of grinders that you can use, but as I mentioned in the previous video, no one's going to buy a $1,000 grinder like this unless you get it used real cheap to grind $10 centers. So this is strictly for entertainment. Let's go down to the basement. And this is the previous video shot several weeks ago where I do the exact same thing, only on a South Bend 10-inch heavy lathe. So check it out, number 558. This video is number 559. I'm down in the basement shop now, and I'm going to spend about 10 minutes talking about 5 or 6 different grinders that I have. And now if this doesn't interest you, you can advance to the meat of the subject here, where I actually do the grinding here in a few minutes. I'll try to put something on the screen as to what the time mark is, but let's talk about these different Dumore grinders. Dumore grinders are, of course, the premier name in tool post type grinders, and they make other products as well. You can't even consider buying one of these new. I don't think you could touch it for $1,000, so if you need one, just have to watch for used ones. Now, this is my largest one, and it takes a 4-inch wheel, and that's the one that I'll be using in this video. This is about 40 years old. They're all pretty old, but it does have a belt guard on them. Some of them do not have belt guards. It has a spindle here that's all sealed, so there are bearings in there, and the dust can't get to them. It is an open motor, which would allow a grit in there, and then we got a switch right here. Now I'll zero in and give you a close-up of this. It is a 1/4 horse motor. It is a little bit on the bulky side. These were made in Racine, Wisconsin. And looking at the bottom, you can see that I had to make the nut here that goes into the compound, and this is a spacer that I also made that brings the grinding wheel up to the center of the lathe spindle. That is, it elevates it, and this one is not adjustable other than with shims. Now the other ones that I am going to show you are adjustable. And this is the model number of the big grinder. This is a cute grinder, and it takes a 3-inch wheel, but you can see the wheel is worn somewhat. It uses a flat belt, but there is no guard. It was every man for himself back when this was made. Some of these grinders, and I'm not sure if this one had that feature, but had a replaceable spindle or quill that would allow internal grinding. But I do not have that. This is all I own, is what you see right here. Now, looking at the bottom, I like this type of nut. It's more of a universal nut that will fit into different compound sizes, you know, on different lathes. So that's a nice feature. This one can also be raised and lowered to adjust the height of it by loosening this bolt right here, and it can raise and lower on this. And there's a place to oil the spindle. And this is also 110 volt. Needs a new cord, as you can see. I'll zero in here and give you a shot of the model number. And there's the model number, and I'm sure Dumore has a website if you want to look it up. This one came in a metal case, and it's appropriately called the Tom Thumb. No guards at all, and it does take a 2-inch wheel. This one is worn a bit, so that would be the size, although this wheel is pretty well ruined. Switch right on here, and by the way, the previous one had an inline switch on the cord. Oilers, also adjustable in height. That bolt is the locking bolt, and that T-nut I believe is made for the Atlas lathe. So this is just great for real small centers. Also needs a new cord, I think. It's been taped. Brush type motor. And even these little ones are very expensive. Remember, these grinders can be used for cylindrical grinding, not just center grinding. Of course, grinding lathe centers is cylindrical grinding, but at an angle. Also a flat belt. Now I've got some accessories. Let me show you the accessories. This is a genuine Dumore wheel dresser, and the diamond nib can be mounted in the position that you see it here, or crossways, or over here, and that is a V-block there that can be clamped right onto the work. Feels like it's aluminum, and here's some different bolts that would bolt down into the compound, different designs. Here is a diamond dresser that I sometimes use that can be held in the 3-jaw chuck, and then this can be set at different angles. That's the diamond. This is a Sears Craftsman grinder. They call it a rotary die grinder, but it can be used for very light duty tool post grinding, and I have all kinds of nibs here. I'm not a big fan of these by any means, but in addition to just offhand work in your shop in the vise, you may use the attachment that I'm going to show you here. And this attachment, and it almost looks like it's been made by Dumore and sold through Craftsman, because it is that hammer tone black or gray color that is used by Dumore. Okay, and here's how it works. That this surface here and here hold the grinder, and of course you would tighten the screws, and then this would go into the tool post, I should say the compound. There's a T-nut that I made some time ago, and this can be raised and lowered, and is really quite well made. It's cast iron. As you can see, it's keyed, so it will raise and lower and be locked in the vertical position with some accuracy. And also they build this in the catalog as being a holder for the grinder, and you could hold this in your bench vise to do various handwork where you would move your work up against the grinding wheel. Now let me show you a 1966 Sears Craftsman catalog where they sell this stuff. 1966, I was a mere boy, and on the page where they sell the Craftsman lathes, and that's basically the lathe that I have right here, not the one I'm going to use in the demonstration, but the one here in the shop, and they sold for $150 a tool post grinder, and then you also could buy the wheel dresser, or the diamond holder I should say, that would clamp right onto the bed of the lathe. I do not have that, and I know that this is an Atlas brand, and it's shown in the Atlas catalog as well. And on another page, an older version of the grinder that I just showed you, but there is what they call the bench stand and holder, and that was $8. So that is what I just showed you, and I'm sure it's not available anymore. And finally, the Dumore hand grinder, and this was given to me by the Dumore company. You've seen it in other videos. Ta-da! And this is virtually brand new, and these are expensive. This is probably $300 or $400. You got the switch right there, That's an improvement, a little guard here so you don't inadvertently turn it on, I guess. Well, why is he showing us a hand grinder, you say? Well, this can be used as a tool post grinder for small work of sorts. And how would that be accomplished? Well, I have this Dumore, and I still got the Dumore decal on here. I've had this since time immemorial, and this will clamp around the grinder in a manner like that. You tighten the screw, of course, and this can be held in your lathe tool post like that, and you could do relatively light grinding. You could do internal grinding as well, but that is the purpose of that. And let me show you another take on that. This is rather small in size, and you wonder how rigid it could be. So this one, also made by Dumore, there's the original Decalomania, and this will clamp in a similar manner, only it's a clamp, and then can be held in the lantern tool post on your lathe, whatever size it is. Now, Dremel type grinders are sometimes used as tool post grinders, never by me, but I've seen in videos where people have made a holder that would fit onto the compound, and I do not know, and some of the holders are even made of wood. How effective, how rigid that is, how worthwhile, I do not know, but possibly for model making or very small work with a grind wheel, not a rotary burr, it may have some merit, some value. I do not know. I have never tried it. You can put it in the comments if you do something like that. So that is the extent here of the grinders that I have. I hope you enjoyed this little part. I think I'll talk a little bit about safety before I go out to the garage and start the grinding, but you know, I'm always leery of any grinder, of sparks and of a wheel exploding, so make sure you wear glasses, goggles, a face shield. Generally I like both, maybe glasses as well as a full face shield when I'm grinding, so protect your eyes at all costs. There may be a need sometimes to wear a respirator for the dust, although in this particular video and lately I have been using the shop vac to pick up the sparks and most of the grinding dust, and it seems to be quite effective, although the extra noise is annoying. Also, when you're grinding on the lathe, you need to protect the machine itself, the ways and the screws and just all of the parts from the grinding dust and the grit and the swarf, which is so damaging to any moving parts. So I like to drape the machine in towels or rags or whatever to prevent that, and then throw the rags away because that swarf is embedded in them. You don't want to wipe the machine with that. And there's always the danger of fire with sparks hitting the rags, so you need to dampen the rags. And then when you're done, you need to remove the moisture away from the lathe bed, and then re-oil everything. Clean it, wipe it again, and oil it to prevent damage to the machine from grinding. And some people will not grind on their lathes at all because of the damage, or they might have machines that are dedicated exclusively to grinding, and sometimes in rooms that are strictly for grinding and keeping the dust away from the other precision machines. So consider all of that when you're grinding on your lathe. Alright, now we are going to go out to the garage. We're finally out in the garage shop and we're ready to do some grinding. So the first thing I will do is to mount the Dumore grinder onto the lathe compound. Again, this is the Atlas Craftsman lathe, 12-inch. But the very first thing I want to do before I mount it, and this is again the T-nut, that's a 1/2-inch fine bolt, and this is the spacer that I drilled and cut specifically to the size that it would raise the shaft in the grinder exactly the same height as center height on the lathe. Okay, and now I want to mount this, but I have set the compound temporarily at exactly 90 degrees. You'll see why in a minute. And a lot of this is a repeat from the previous video because I cannot be sure that everybody watched that. For the past 40 years, I've always set the angle of the grinder by baguette and bagage. That is, trying to line up the axis of the spindle with the axis of the machine. And they really need to be right on. And then I will set the compound for 30 degrees. Well, how am I going to do that? And this is how I did it, well, similarly in the last video. But I'm going to put a 4-jaw chuck on the spindle right now and essentially line up the face of the wheel with the chuck. I have adjusted the jaws on the chuck so that they are all equidistant out and are slightly larger than the, not just the washer here, but the blotter. I don't want the jaws right here to touch the blotter. I want them to touch the actual grit of the grinding wheel. So now I will move this in, move the whole carriage in, and I can move it back and forth like that until I get it squared up. And some of that is by feel. And that's pretty darn accurate. And I know the guard is in the way. I wish it wasn't, but now I will tighten down this bolt and lock the Dumor into position. And now I will set the compound angle for 30 degrees. Now the compound along with the grinder set at 30 degrees, and I have to use a flashlight for that because it's kind of dark down there and you're not going to be able to see that, nor do you need to, I believe, but it's setting the compound the same as you would to turn a taper by the compound rest method, because that is in fact what we are doing. And off comes the chuck. I should have a board under there, but there's not room for a board right now. And then I'll put a thread protector on there to keep the grit off of the thread. This is the center that I will be grinding, and it's not real bad, but there's a little bit of a notch right there. So when you install the center, make sure that the spindle hole is clean and wipe the center and the sleeve both inside and out. You don't want any grit or any burrs or anything that will interfere with the alignment of that. And I will tap it with a soft hammer. Now this is my wheel dresser, or I should say my diamond. Now you may recognize this red part. That was in that Sears catalog, wasn't it? But not the lower part. This is just all made up of various pieces that I came up with. These are actually collars off of the milling machine that give me the right height. Also, I get my final height adjustment here because I want the height of the diamond nib to be the height of the spindle on the grinder, and this will clamp right to the bed and it will be very rigid, and the nib comes approximately perpendicular to the face of the wheel, or the periphery of the wheel. All right, I've done several things here. This is the spout of the shop vac. This is a wet towel here covering the bed, and here's a dry towel that's extending over onto the cross slide to protect it. And if you want to use some of your wife's towels, you know, to cover some other things, I think that this vacuum will pick up most of the dust, but I really don't like that grit all over the place like I told you before. So, you know, protect whatever you think you need to that won't get caught in the wheel. Now I have, again, set this for 30 degrees compound, and I've locked the carriage. I put a little black on the wheel, so maybe it'll show up. And I think you recall that several things are being done to the wheel. We're sharpening it, we're squaring it off, and we're bringing it into exact compliance with that 30-degree angle, because I may be a half degree off, I'm not sure. I tried to get it as close as I can, but I will start the grinder, not the spindle of the lathe at this time, and just run the diamond across the wheel, or should I say the wheel across the diamond. Everything that I'm doing here can be done much more quickly than it seems because I'm talking about it. But now what I'll do is remove the drapes and take the wheel dresser, the diamond, off of there, and then move the whole carriage up close to the center, the dead center. Remember also that I have to run the lathe spindle in reverse, probably at about 400 RPM. I will be wearing my face shield. Again, the drapes have been moved, and even the pickup here has been moved over a little bit. And the hose is supported on a stand that's out of sight, but by moving the carriage up and the feeding for depth of cut, of course, is done with the cross feed, and the lateral movement with the compound. I think I'll put a little Sharpie on the tip here so you can see what's going to happen, because it's not going to take very much to clean that up. You see, that didn't take very long or very much grinding to true that up, sharpen it. We don't need it all that sharp. I'll probably run a stone across there so I don't scratch myself. Now check clearances that you don't strike anything. Take a dry run before you turn your grinder or your machine on, as always, because you see I'm pretty close to the thread protector there. Back the carriage away. And you can see there's almost no grit on here, either from the grinding wheel or the sparks, and certainly no danger of fire. So the vacuum, which I've never used until recently, really does a good job of taking that away. Matter of fact, right here, can you see the amount of swarf that's embedded itself into the plastic? As I said, this is such a sharp point, I like to take a stone and just dull it a little bit. A file probably will not do. Already that's better. So it's not so lethal. And there's the center. Looks very good. 60 degrees, of course. All right, looks like a perfect fit at 60 degrees, and remember that half of that is 30, so that's why I set the compound for half of it to give it an included angle of 60. Now also take note here in a close-up, that is the grinding swarf and dust. It will not chip off. I tried to get it off because in fact it has burned its way into the plastic, but that much has escaped falling on the lathe or even on the drape, so this is highly effective. Highly effective. I don't know why I didn't do that years ago. People told me about it, or I saw it in other videos. Now I have to take the wet cloths off and then put a little oil on here in case of rust. And then one final thing, I hope you liked the video. Remember that there was this is a three-part video. The first one was on South Bend, this one was on Atlas Craftsman, and in the next one I am going to attempt to grind a live center, a ball bearing center. This isn't in real bad shape, and it'll be pretty similar to what I have been doing with just a little bit different spin on things. So make sure you watch the following video as well when available. Hope you like this series. This is tubalcain saying so long for now.